Hello, I'm Janet Morana, Executive Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to the Catholic View for Women, news and views of interest to women, truly from a Catholic perspective. And I'm here joined by my co-host, starting on my far left, my good friend Teresa Tomeo.
Hey, Janet.
And of course, we know Teresa by her wonderful daily program called The Catholic Connection,
which you're a part of every week on Friday mornings.
Exactly, and that's on EWTN Global Radio.
That's right.
And here, to me here is my good friend Astrid Bennett Gutierrez.
Yes.
And Astrid has done marvelous work as director of the Los Angeles Pregnancy Services.
That's right. Thank you, Janet. Happy to be here.
Great to be here. And of course, today's topic is a topic that I know especially for Teresa and I, because we brought into the culture contraception, right? And we're going to say contraception, not.
Yes, exactly.
You know? I mean, because I know, like we said, in 2010, 50th anniversary of the pill, I mean, I got swept up into that whole thing, thinking that it was going to be liberating for women. This is going to let us decide when we want to have children. You know, we had to be in control. It was all born out of that, I am woman, hear me roar stuff.
It's interesting, though, because it was born out of the church from a yes for women, not a no for women.
Exactly.
And I think the problem is that we haven't projected the beauty of the church as a big yes and not a big no. It really is a big yes. It's a yes to our health, physical health. It's a yes to our psychological well-being, and it's certainly, obviously, a yes to our spiritual well-being in terms of being in a better place with God when you're following the church teachings, obviously, and not committing mortal sin. But in general, I think sometimes when people look at the Catholic Church, and you and I think, had that view of it growing up, that it's no. You can't do this, you can't do that. No. But if you understand why the Church is saying this and the benefit to you, then that is a big yes. It's a freeing thing. Pope Benedict had a great quote a couple of years ago when he was speaking to the youth in Italy, I think, at a youth group, and he said, young people have got to stop thinking of the 10 Commandments and the church as a big no. It's actually a big yes to love and life. It really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What a treasure we have here, ladies. And I, come from Generation X in our 30s, and I also come from the Hispanic community. And as you know, Hispanics are, like other minorities, are targeted by the abortion industry. But also, the pill is also, really pushed and promoted to the minority. So I see a lot of the damage that is done, but I also see a lot of hope. Hispanics are open to natural family planning, to what the church proposes.
If they know about it.
That's
the problem. We didn't know about it.
In Scripture, we have Hosea 4:6 in the Old Testament. My people perish for lack of knowledge.
I love that scripture.
And that is so true, especially in my community. Once we give them the truth, the beauty of what the church teaches, then they can be healthier, happier, and truly feel like they are abiding in God's grace.
And it's so interesting because there's so much out there, just like with abortion and the other issues that are misrepresented in terms of just being a lie.
That's right.
The whole contraception thing. Now, they will talk in the public, and Janet, you and I have discussed this on my show, and actually last year there was a lot of discussion, and has been actually the last few years, of hormone replacement therapy.
That's right.
And the problems associated with that for menopausal women.
They have no problems talking about cancer risk with that, but when it comes to the risk with taking the pill, they're silent.
It's very similar.
And it's a hidden agenda. It's Planned Parenthood, Title X money, all that wrapped up.
A double standard that is prevalent.
I think it's great that they're talking about it with hormone replacement therapy so women know, but why won't they talk about this with the birth control? Because there is an agenda attached to it.
Absolutely.
The culture of death is just basically prevalent in the medical industry, unfortunately, and people are kept in the dark about this truth, and they're losing their lives and possibly their souls.
And then causing all kinds of problems later on.
Absolutely.
Well, for this series, Teresa and I went out and got the women on the street comments to see what they thought about the church's teaching on contraception. So let's take a look at what some of our women out there on the street thought about the church's teaching on contraception.
Great.
What do you have to say? 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 What do you have to say?
Christ never said that following him would be easy, but he did tell us that he was the truth. And the numbers speak for themselves. If you look at the statistics which illustrate how much higher the rate of divorce is among couples who use contraception versus couples who practice NFP, you clearly realize that the church must be onto something.
I don't want to be out there sleeping with a million guys before I'm married. I just don't think that's right. And I think there's just something kind of sick about that, honestly.
Well, it's great to get the opinion of the women on the street, you know. And then in preparing for this show, I had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. Angela Lanfranchi. She's a breast cancer surgeon in New Jersey. She's been in practice for many years. She's also been very outspoken about the link between contraception and breast cancer and the damage it is doing to women and their health. And so I think let's look at this now from a scientific point of view and see what Dr. Angela had to say.
Well, oral contraceptives have been classified as group 1 carcinogens for breast, cervical, and liver cancer according to the International Agency on Research for Cancer. They're in the same group that tobacco is for lung cancer and asbestos is for mesothelioma. So they are definitely cancer-causing chemicals. There are warnings in the physician's desk reference, PDR, that these oral contraceptives will increase the risk of cancer. So if women do read their package insert carefully, they will see that. Usually the risk is downplayed. Someone might point to the fact that oral contraceptives lower the risk of ovarian cancer. But if you looked at 100 women in this country with cancer, 38 would have breast cancer and only 3 would have ovarian cancer. So it's a much lower risk. Not only that, is there ever a time where anybody is given a group 1 carcinogen, according to the World Health Organization, to treat a non-disease, which is fertility? And many times people are taking the oral contraceptives for that reason alone. At the Breast Cancer Prevention Institute, we have a brochure that says if it's not okay for him to take steroids, why is it okay for her? And in it we talk about the fact that oral contraceptives are female steroids and do the same sorts of damage to young women that the male steroids do to men. Yeah. Oral contraceptives are often given to young women, teenagers, when they're growing up because of irregular menstrual cycles. In fact, having irregular menstrual cycles for the first 5 years after they get their period at menarche actually lowers their breast cancer risk. So it's damaging to give young women with irregular cycles the pill to prevent that. And we certainly have better treatments for dysmenorrhea or painful periods than the pill, which is a group 1 carcinogen. Well, the pill, the reason women like the pill, or young women like the pill, is that it stimulates their breast tissue and they end up having larger breasts. And they also have very light periods. And light periods are because they don't allow the endometrium to thicken, the lining of the uterus to thicken. But because of that, that makes the pill also an abortifacient, because an embryo can't implant in the lining of the uterus when it's very thin. So sometimes women are given the pill to make their periods lighter. But women ought to be aware that it's also an abortifacient, not allowing the embryo to implant.
Wow. Well, you know, that's important information. And to me, the highlight here was that 2005 World Health Report saying that contraceptive birth control pills are a class 1
group 1 carcinogen.
Group 1 carcinogen.
And the fact that it's not getting out there,
you know,
it's a tragedy.
It's a tragedy
for women.
I mean, wouldn't that scare you enough? I mean, if you opened up the packet and it said it on the package, just like it says Surgeon
well,
General
there are
warning
warnings on the package of the birth control pills.
Enough
how many
read
it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I counsel women every day at LAPS, and these women, a lot of them are using the birth control pill, and they are experiencing so many side effects. But one thing that is astounding and that always amazes women, or really just shocks them really, is that the birth control pill and hormonal contraceptives can actually cause chemical abortions. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is incredible.
But they're abortifacients.
Their abortifacient
That's right.
is not getting out there either. So this pill is just a Pandora's box of so many evils, and it's it's just affected society in so many ways.
Well, that's the thing I think that we had to deal with, Janet and I, because we both used the birth control pill, and we never had an abortion, but there could have been a situation where if it's an abortive patient, you don't know.
And I had dealt with this on a Rachel's Vineyard retreat where I actually felt the grief of having lost and said no to life, you know? And that's where the church really has us in mind. You know, they're really, you know, they get it right. They're giving us the yes for women's health, both, like you're saying, physically, psychologically, and our spiritual well-being.
Yeah, I want to mention this incredible document that's going to be one of our homework assignments for this segment. But this incredible document, an encyclical actually, Humana Vitae of Human Life, which was issued at a very controversial time in our nation, our world's history, I should say, back in the 60s. And this is from, of course, Pope Paul VI. And it turned out actually to be, I think, one of the most prophetic encyclicals ever written. I don't know if we have time to read the entire quote, but I just want to mention the 4 prophecies that Paul VI mentioned in this document. If you think about what has happened, I wonder if he really knew. Obviously, he's working through the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
But look at what's happened now in our culture with embryonic stem cell research, in vitro fertilization, surrogate motherhood, all these things, all these issues that are coming up. He had major prophecies about what would happen in society to women. You know, so let me go over these 4. He talked about there would be a decline in morality if we accepted this mindset of abortion and contraception. A huge decline in morality. Well, I don't think it takes a brain surgeon or a Philadelphia lawyer to figure that out,
right? It's an understatement.
Okay, so we have the decline in morality. The objectification of women would increase, and that men would treat women as objects, which we absolutely have.
Pornography now on the internet is widespread.
Government coercion. They would use contraception and also abortion for with coercive methods. We see that in China. We see that with the United Nations and other groups. And then treating our bodies as machines.
Right.
I've already mentioned that.
In vitro.
Yeah, in vitro. I don't have time to read the quote. Maybe we can get to it after the break. But it's so phenomenal. It's actually section 17 of the document, and these are where these 4 predictions are made. These 4 prophecies are made, and they come true.
Well, we have to take a break now, ladies. So let's take our break, and we'll be back. We have a great interview with Dr. Janet Smith.
Yes.
Great. Stay with us. Well, you know, Teresa, that document is so important. Let's hear what the Holy Father had to say.
Now, let me go back also to the 4 prophecies that were in this document, Humana Vitae is what we're talking about, of Human Life, 1968, Pope Paul VI. He talked about a decline in morality, objectification of women would increase. There would be government procedures where coercion would be involved using contraception or abortion, which we've already seen, and treating our bodies as machines. We don't have time in this show, or if we had 10 shows, to see how that's happening, because it's all over the place. All right, but let me read this. And again, this is section 17 of Humana Vitae. Let them consider, first of all, how wide and easy a road would thus be opened up towards conjugal infidelity and the general lowering of morality. Not much experience is needed in order to know human weakness and to understand that men, especially the young who are so vulnerable on this point, have need of encouragement to be faithful to the moral law, so that they must not be offered some easy means of eluding its observance. It's also to be feared that the man, growing used to the employment of anti-conceptive practices or contraception, may finally lose respect for women, and no longer caring for her physical and psychological equilibrium, may come to the point of considering her as a mere instrument of selfish enjoyment and no longer as his respected and beloved companion. Now, we see that all over the place with promiscuity, with the sex trafficking that's going on, with pornography. I mean, bar none, it's out of control.
That's right.
He goes on to say, let it be considered also that a dangerous weapon would thus be placed in the hands of those public authorities who take no heed of moral problems. Who could blame a government for applying to the solution of the problems of the community those whose means acknowledged to be licit for married couples in the solution of a family problem? Who will stop rulers from favoring, from even imposing upon their peoples, if they were to consider it necessary, the method of contraception which they judge to be most efficacious? In such a way, men wishing to avoid individual family or social difficulties encountered in the observance of the divine law would reach the point of placing at the mercy of the intervention of public authorities the most personal and most reserved sector of conjugal intimacy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and this was in 1968, before we had any of the pill was already out at that time, just coming out actually at that time.
What was it like growing up in those times? I mean, the pill really dehumanized, I think,
it did.
It was really, it was all taken from when I was 9 years old when this came out. But the whole idea of this contraception came out of the women's lib movement.
Exactly.
You think? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what it was. I mean, in 1968, when this document came out, I was a sophomore in high school. And I can remember leading up to that, you know, what we had was, first we had Vatican II, so the church kind of changed from everything in Latin to this. Then you had the women's lib thing, you know, I'm woman, hear me roar, and women, you know, burning bras and all this stuff, and women in the workforce, equal pay, which those things were good. You know,
the church acknowledges
and the church acknowledges
that things needed to change.
That's
the conditions for women
and
were
the church
not the
was all there for women having, you know, they should get maternity
for good
leave.
things.
They shouldn't lose a job because they're pregnant.
But nobody knows that. That's the other thing.
It all gets mixed in.
Yeah, they look at the church as being a big no instead of they're really at the big yes. So, you know, in '68 when this came out, the other problem was the church didn't agree. Meaning the Holy Father but there were priests and bishops dissenting from the teaching.
And then we had all that.
It was a
and then
crisis
the media
for
just
sure.
took that and ran with that to say, oh well, you really don't have to. You know, you can take birth control pills. I mean, I even had a priest in a pre-Cana talk tell us that if you had a good enough reason, you could take the pill. Yeah. So it was.
Yeah, ladies, I really want to stress how much people really should go on the internet, look for good books to counter all these ideas, and really bring out the wonderful, all the knowledge that Pope Paul VI really just disseminated with this. With Humanae Vitae. A couple of really awesome resources. I want to mention Patrick Coffin.
Coffin's book is great.
EWTN Radio host,
he hosts
Patrick
Catholic
Coffin.
Answers. Yeah.
He has a wonderful book called Sex au Naturel that talks about natural family planning. It's the answer, the big yes, right, to life, and it is effective. That's an important thing people have to know. It's not the rhythm method. It is effective, and he writes about it in a very winsome and almost humorous sometimes manner. So I recommend that you buy that for 30-somethings, newlyweds that really are, you know, confused about this issue. This is a very good book to read. And also Jason Everett, another EWTN host. He talks about NFP. He has a wonderful website called chastity.com. You'll find wonderful information there. Share it, send it via email.
Well, we're running out of time. We have to get to that Janet Smith, Dr. Janet Smith.
That's right.
We forgot about that. We have to do, because she is incredible. Her talk, Contraception, Why Not?
Oh, it's gone around the world.
Around the world. Over a million copies have been distributed. Probably well more than that now.
She's my hero.
And now, you know, besides the audio, she's got that
video.
DVD.
Right.
It's great.
And she's given us permission to use parts of it for this particular discussion. And so we picked a 4-minute segment, about a 3-4-minute segment that we thought was really, really good in terms of, you know, LaFranchi talked about the medical aspect of it. Now, Dr. Janet Smith talks about that, but talks about really the insanity of this whole thing is if, you know, we're trying to do this to make ourselves more appealing, I guess, to men, and, you know, you're thinking that you want to be more, quote unquote, sexually available, and yet the pill just does the opposite, and it affects relationships, and that's a great talk that you have to get and watch or listen to. So let's see what Dr. Janet Smith, and she's got a great whimsical approach to this whole thing, which is it's somewhat, you know, cynical, but I mean, she really makes you think, like, what are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? So let's take a listen and a look.
Contraception has radically changed our understanding of sexuality, radically changed it, and not for the better. And that it's time that we reconsidered our wholesale rejection of the Church's teaching on contraception, and perhaps we will come to recognize that this really is a wise and prophetic voice. The Christian view of sexuality says that it's meant to bring together a man and a woman who love each other in a really strong and powerful way that moves them to make a lifetime commitment to each other, a lifetime commitment which will welcome new life. And by doing so, you are always expanding the circle of love. You're expanding, you get two families together, grandparents that come together, their children get married, their children have children, those children get married, those children have children, and everybody gets more and more related, and we love each other, and we welcome new life. And that's the Christian view of sexuality. But again, in our culture, we now think that babies are kind of a strange phenomena as a result of sex. We no longer think that you need to be in love to have sexual intercourse. At one time, people thought, you shouldn't have sex unless you're in love. And you shouldn't have sex unless you're prepared for babies. And you're not prepared for babies until you're married. People thought that the contraceptive pill was going to make an amazing contribution to the world. The contraceptive pill was invented in the late 1950s and basically came on the market in the early 1960s. And people thought it was going to control the population crisis. I think you might notice that it didn't do that. People thought increased access to contraception was going to reduce the number of unwed pregnancies and abortions. I think you know that's not the case. And people thought that contraception was going to improve marriages. And again, I'm going to try to make some arguments tonight, draw some connections, and show that contraception, in fact, I think is contributing greatly to divorce, to unhappy marriages and divorce. In 1960, only 3% of white babies were born out of wedlock, 3%. About 22% of black babies were born out of wedlock. About 6% of all babies were born out of wedlock in 1960. It was hard to get a contraceptive in 1960. It was hard to get a condom. You had to go to a seedy gas station or a seedy hotel and get a condom. You couldn't get them in your welcome back to school kits, as kids now do. By the year 2003, some 24% or so of white babies are born out of wedlock. 68% of black babies are born out of wedlock. About 34% of all babies born in the United States are born out of wedlock. 34%, a little more than 1 out of 3 babies born in the United States are born to an unwed mother. 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3 pregnancies in the United States ends in abortion. 1 out of 2 marriages ends in divorce. And so if you put together all these statistics, it really means that if a baby is conceived in the United States, that baby has about a 28% chance, first, of being born, right? Of being born to a woman who is married, and being born to a woman who is married and will remain married to the same man for the rest of her life, right? 28% chance. Every other baby conceived in the United States will be aborted, or born to a single mother, or born into a household that is divided by divorce. If you want to start looking at where we have the source of all the social problems we have in our culture, this is a very good place to start. So we have a phenomena here that about 53% of the women who go to abortion clinics say that they were using a contraceptive when they got pregnant. 53%. Nearly the rest of them say that they are contraceptively experienced. They've used contraceptives in the past, but they weren't using them this time, right? Contraceptives make them get into relationships where they're having sexual intercourse, but for all sorts, they don't like the side effects of contraceptives. Sometimes they break up with the boyfriend and they think they're done with him for a while, so they go off the pill for a while, and he comes around and they have sex with them and they get pregnant. So if anybody thinks that contraception is going to reduce the number of unwed pregnancies and abortions, I think it's time to take another look. In fact, there's not a country in the world which had abortion illegal, and that means virtually every country in the world has had abortion illegal. And in those countries in which abortion has been illegal, in which contraception gets introduced, becomes widely used, that's when you get pressure to change the laws against abortion. The laws against abortion were not changed because we didn't know when human life begins. We've known for a very long time when human life begins. You can look at any gynecological, obstetrical, embryological textbook way back, for decades back, and you will find a sentence that says, human life begins at conception. We've known that for a very long time. Doctors know that. Human life begins at conception. But the reason we were pressing to have the laws changed against abortion was not because we were confused about when human life began, but because people were getting pregnant and needed abortion. They needed abortion, and they were getting pregnant because we'd become a contraceptive culture, a culture in which people were having sex outside of marriage, and when they got pregnant, they wanted to have access to abortion as a kind of a backup to failed contraceptives.
I had so many people tell me that viewing or listening to that talk has been literally life-changing.
It was for me.
Yeah, yeah, huge. Now, that's one of our resources in our homework assignment for this segment, right, Janet?
Yes, that's it. So we want everyone to go to thecatholicviewforwomen.com, and right there on our website, we're going to have listed where you can get contraception, why not, Janet's DVD, the full-blown talk. We're also going to have the Amana Vitae document and also a study guide for that document. And that's the homework assignment. You've got to read it and do the study guide. All right?
And also I want to recommend my book Newsflash, because I have a lot of my own conversion in really taking myself to task, and my husband and I sitting down talking to our priest and going to confession about contraception, and then also just studying the documents ourselves and what that did for us in our marriage.
And then the final resource is called The Contraception of Grief. It's a book written by Dr. Teresa Burke, and my testimony is in there, and other testimonies like mine of people who have used contraception. So go to our website, thecatholicviewforwomen.com, and join us next time on The Catholic View for Women.